Here's Tate Cantrell trying to be Max Smolaks, introducing Tate Cantrell. On today's podcast, we have Tate Cantrell, CTO for Verne Global, a sustainable high-performance data center company based in Iceland.
Wow, that was great.
That was professional, Max. Take notes.
Now you're the second guest of this podcast.
I feel honored.
Great. Where are you based?
Well, I'm based just outside of Washington, D.C., right between the capital and really, honestly, the largest contingent of data centers anywhere in the world, I would say, out in Loudoun County. That's actually where I got my start in data centers, believe it or not.
And obviously, like, the whole thing is you guys have decided not to go to that place where all the data centers are and go somewhere else.
That's right. I remember I was part of a company called DuPont Fabros Technology. I actually helped them get started. Our first anchor customer was this little company at the time called Google back in the early noughts, and they seemed to have a pretty good business model. But what we did is we were able to combine real estate and technology. So the benefits of real estate that give you the ability to run your business model out and feel protected while you're doing it. And as a result, we were really successful. We built these huge data centers, and it seemed like everywhere we were putting them, they were all connected to coal-fired power grids. And the honest truth is, about 2008, I got sick of it. Felt like I wasn't leaving a good legacy for my three boys, and decided to do something else. And I landed in Iceland, of all places.
Okay, and that's a country that was essentially created by God to house data centers, right? Tate, you're an expert on hardware, or at least you definitely know your hardware and has been talking about it for years. So, what do you think about another piece of news from this week, where Nvidia essentially passed Intel in its total valuation? The idea that they did it on the power of the GPUs and essentially pushed by AI, and somewhat interestingly, Intel couldn't get there in time.
Just yesterday, I was participating in a webinar. It was a major OEM provider that integrates Nvidia hardware into their CPU-based servers. And I asked the question, hey, Nvidia is claiming that we're moving from the node design to the data center design. And I asked, I said, so how do you as this OEM provider, which I'm not going to name, how do you play in a world where, Nvidia controls the data center? And the top executive said, no, I know what Tate's getting at. And let's all face it. I mean, with the IP that Nvidia has acquired, they're not a GPU company anymore. They're more than that. I mean,
right.
Mellanox, Mellanox is doing co-processing in the NIC card. I mean, at the DPU, they're calling it, right? The distributed processing unit it's not only managing network and communicating with the mothership, it's actually doing processing. I mean, and if you controlled that entire stack and you were being valued based on your future potential value, I think you'd go up.
The future potential value is a big part of, it's one of the funny things of capitalism that Intel, if you have invested in Intel and you're interested in the data center market, they own like 98% of the CPU market, and they're not going to get any better than that. Whereas Nvidia, if you were to invest now, the idea is that they're going to soon control way more of the data center. So there's a lot more runway, and that always kind of changes how valuations act, not just based on how valuable the company is now, but how valuable you think it's going to be.
A note on open source. So there are several CPU kind of open source initiatives, like RISC-V and Open Power. There is nothing for GPUs, so maybe that's an interesting idea somebody could develop. What would an open source GPU architecture would look like? Because again, just like you mentioned, vendor lock-in. Nobody likes that, but we just don't have comparable platforms yet, and this is why we should cheerlead for people like GraphCore and Cerebras and Ampere.
One of the things that kind of the new holy grail of quant analysis is these what are called Markov chain Monte Carlo probabilistic models. And what you're doing there is you're taking Monte Carlo, which is just it just means brute force, and you're tying in deep learning. And you're putting those two together, and it just happens that GraphCore's IPU design kills it with those Markov chain models, and knocks Nvidia out of the park. So I mean, if the financial world has anything to say about it, maybe GraphCore is the most valuable company in the world. So.
Right, because that's the thing to bear in mind with Nvidia is that GPUs are great for AI, but they kind of locked into that. You know, they started off looking at video games, doing a lot of physics-based things there, and then research was like, oh, we could try this for other things, and then the whole AI community exploded, and Nvidia's grown with it. But it was luck or convenient chance. Whereas you've got these companies like GraphCore that said, let's start from the beginning with an AI chip designed purely for the modern AI workloads.
Yes, so GraphCore is interesting. Another interesting option is, of course, Cerebras. So a lot of people have heard about their giant wafer scale engine chips. Not a lot of people have used them. Why? Because of the cost. Seb,
Yeah.
Seb, this is your little fact.
$3 million a chip, like just for one. That's a lot. You know, how much stuff could you get in a Verne data center for $3 million?
Yeah, depends on how dense you'd want to go.
Oof,
I mean, we
yeah.
can make it pretty dense, but that'd be oh wow,
1.2 trillion transistors in one chip.
Wow.
TSMC, the guys that are manufacturing it, are saying that they're very interested in the idea of wafer scale engine chips. So either Cerebras ones or other ones, and they're going to be preparing their factories to build more of those.
I think one of the things that is important to remember is that Nvidia has the software development kit, and they control that ecosystem.
Right.
And so one of the issues with focusing on hardware is, at the end of the day, you always have a workflow involving developers, and if you have to retrain 1,000 developers to do something completely different or very customized, that's potentially not going to work at a business level.
Like these GraphCore, Cerebras, all of them are cool companies, but will they kind of get past that stage of not getting acquired? Is the other question. Will they just get swallowed up?